think a lot of people underrate that movie, the Bike Riders from Danny Lyon's book. That was basically a pictorial book. I think from the late '60s, the mid to late '60s to the very early '70s, about the Outlaws MC. I know the Bike Riders isn't specifically accurate to the T about the Outlaws MC, but I think it's really probably the best motorcycle movie going. Now, one movie that was really considered top notch way back in the day, and it was top notch in some ways, like it was Easy Rider '69, right? You see them right here, these guys taking off in the desert, Dennis Hopper, Peter Fonda on the two choppers, and actually those choppers were designed and made by a black guy over in, what was his name again? I don't remember. Cliff Vaughn? Cliff Vaughn was one of the guys, but that wasn't the main guy. Can't remember his name right off the top of my head. But I did put a video out years ago. But the thing is, this movie was, as far as scenes and the bikes themselves, it was cool as hell because, today you look at it, you don't consider it to be so radical, but in the 60s, this was radical. Like, what was before this? There was nothing like this before this. That's the thing. Like, now you look at it, it's like old hat, it's like, because you're used to it, right? I mean, they're playing like Led Zeppelin and Elevators today, that's the thing. But the movie itself, as far as a movie, it was really retarded. I mean, I really didn't see any point to this movie. They're just riding around looking for America, but they couldn't find it anywhere. That was the whole gist of this movie, man. Really stupid. But the Bike Riders, I don't think you're ever going to see a movie like this again. This is Norman Reedus riding in, and I don't even, to tell you the truth, I don't know any of these actors. I don't know any of them. I don't know who the hell these people were. I don't even know these are famous actors and stuff. But I know kind of know their names now. I didn't even know who this guy was. I didn't even heard of him. That's how much I watch movies. But I got into this movie. They did this so damn good because, it's one thing to make a movie back in the 60s or the 70s about the culture back then. And usually when they made those movies in that time frame, they had the right stuff to make the movie, but they did not explain what was going on. This movie did an excellent job explaining what was going on. What I'll say, there's one thing I did not like about this movie, if you didn't see it, was when this guy gets shot in being at a knife fight challenge, and the guy pulls out a gun and shoots him in front of everybody. That was, if there's one part of the movie I think that should have been changed, was that, because that seriously is unrealistic. 8 million witnesses, well, not 8 million, but, dozens of witnesses in front, and you do it right in front of all these people and stuff. I'm like, that was just ludicrous. But that was the one part. But otherwise, this movie was freaking great. Unfortunately, they had to do so much work to put this stuff together. Like, back when they're, Easy Riders, Hell's Angels, '69, and stuff. They had a lot of movies back then, and actually a lot of movies back in the day were more focused. I don't remember any movies about the Outlaws, which is cool about the Bike Riders movie, even though it doesn't say it's about the Outlaws MC per se. It is. It is in a roundabout way. It's not designed to be totally historically accurate all the way, but in a roundabout way, it explains how things were in a day. This movie, Easy Riders, though, I'm kind of picking out on this movie, even though this movie was, as a movie, I personally think it was like, the scenes in it were great. It was so cool. People, riding around, Captain America, Dennis Hopper, Billy Bike and stuff. That was so cool. It influenced all the bike building from going forward. Everybody was imitating, taking elements of these two bikes and putting on their bikes. That was the time when there was no baggers out there, right? But the thing is, it was retarded as a movie, man. I really was. It was just dumb. And it didn't really capture, it captured some stuff, and some of the other movies captured some stuff in some ways, but they were so Hollywood. It was so, like, dumb drama scenes and stuff. Nothing was right. But when you had, the Bike Riders, it was a cool ass movie, man. It really did capture what it would, like I would have been young back here. I mean, this would have been, I don't know when this would have been. So in 70, oh, how old would I be in 70? 15? So I was 15 in 70. So this went, but I do remember this kind of stuff. I mean, I've seen it, even though I wasn't in the Chicago area, I was in Northeast New Jersey area. And, pretty urban type area. And, there's bikes pulling in the Sunoco station, used to hang out all the time and stuff. We saw stuff all the time. There's a lot of cruising going on. Cars and bikes in the summer, in the wintertime, just cars. But, the thing is, this movie really captured what was, how it was back then. The other movies, even though they were made back in the time, they really didn't capture a lot of stuff right. It was kind of like a bunch of Hollywood drama garbage. This movie did a freaking super, super job. And, I hope they make something else beyond this one. But, boy, this must have been very, very, very difficult to get all these old bikes together. I mean, that must have been, I don't know how I was watching some videos on what they had to go through to do that. They did so much to do that. If you're talking like back in the day, I'm just showing an Easy Riders movie thing here. That was easy. Not these bikes. These were custom made by Ben Hardy. Ben Hardy, that's the guy. I'm trying to remember. The black guy that he actually did. Peter Fonda had some elements he put into it, too. At first, he was kind of saying he took more credit for what he did. But he actually had some design elements he suggested. But it was Ben Hardy that made the bikes. I think the one that found out about it was not Billy Lane. I don't know what the hell was his name. Man, I can't remember off the top of my head. But he found there was another dude that found out about it later on because he would have been relegated to the dustbin of history. Kind of has an outlaw name. I forgot what his name is off the top. He was an old Confederate guerrilla descendant. Supposedly, that's what he says anyway. Can't remember it off the top of my head, man. It's kind of weird, doing things on the fly here. I decided to make this video because I was thinking about some of this stuff. And I just remembered how much, even though this movie it was so cool in a way because a lot of the scenes, but as a whole, and bikes are really cool. The way everybody was dressed and stuff was really cool. And cruising down the highway was really cool, but it was a retarded-ass movie, man. It was stupid back then, but everybody it just caught on, man. It became a cult classic. And it made everything happen, this movie. Even though, now, Hollywood, Hell's Angels, they're California, and they had the advantage of getting the word out on their organization a lot because they're in the Hollywood area, the movie makers are, so they were in a lot of movies. This movie, The Bikeriders, even though this isn't like a totally factual, accurate account of the Outlaws, but it's, they used the Vandals on it, MC or something, it is pretty close. It's pretty close. I mean, it rhymes with what the history should be. It's not pinpoint accurate or anything like that, but it does make this movie above every other motorcycle movie out there makes a more accurate representation of what the bikers were like back then, including this guy. I heard what's this guy, Funny Sonny? I heard I watched some biker movies, stuff. I heard his daughter hated the fact that they represented him with these teeth like this, but he just, I don't know, poetic license, I guess. It's like, it's not really, it's not supposed to be exactly perfectly accurate, but you can imagine some guys out there that were riding around and they get their teeth messed up after a while from not brushing their teeth and stuff, living out on the road and eating rocks while they're riding down the road. It really wasn't Funny Sonny's teeth like that, but it was, a little bit of poetic license. But the fact that he even did that it's kind of accurate if you applied it to some other people, maybe, And that's the whole point with this movie. Even though it wasn't pinpoint accurate about the Outlaws. It really captures. There's nothing. There's nothing. There's nothing else that you could point to that is got something, anything that captures kind of what it was like back then. You know, there's some crazy mofos back then. You know, so did you floss after you ate like that? I don't know, but you know, it's like the people were wild, man. And you know, the thing is, you know, it's kind of what always got me. Like I noticed the trend from when the bikers were they really were badasses, man, and everybody kind of mainstream hated them. Everybody, the mainstream hated the bikers, and everybody was scared of them, man, pretty much. And then something happened, like I guess it was more like in the late '80s. By the time the late '80s came around, it went more mainstream. Even though you always had the ones that were like really bikers, when it went more mainstream in the late '80s, before the late '80s even, it was changed. But when you're talking this time period, when you're talking about what the Bikeriders movie was about, in the mid to late '60s, early '70s, these guys were freaking crazy, man, and the cops hated them. The cops hated them, man. I'm telling you that right. The cops, they still hate them, man. They know which ones are the attorneys and stuff, dressed in the garb. But like, if you're still like a biker, the cops hate you, man. You know, pretty much. Maybe depending on what county you're in, but that's another. Certain counties, you might have a problem. You know, I guess it depends on where you're at. It's more accepted now, though. But pretty much anybody back then walking around like this, forget it. You know, that was one good thing about this Easy Riders movie. They depicted basically, because the Easy Riders movie showed the intertwining between like the bikers and the hippies, a little more so, and that was true too. Because even though they didn't quite sync, because a lot of bikers were ex-military and stuff like that, they weren't like they're okay with war, but they kind of, there was some things, partying and sex and stuff and booze, they were fine with that part, but they were warlike, they weren't like a, peace, love, and whoopee-doo shit, unless it was with women, but as far as the hippie movement, that was very much integrated with the bikers back then, and that's one good thing about the Easy Riders movie. It kind of showed that, it showed that, it was intertwined. Oh, this is goofy with that freaking helmet, man. I hated that part of that movie. That was stupid. Guy's having fun though. But the point is, this is another thing too. This would have been very commonplace even in the 70s. Hitchhiking. Can you imagine doing that stuff today? Not many people would do it today. Sometimes they do it, but depends on where you're at. But a lot of people wouldn't. Back then, man, people would hitchhike all over the place, man. The hippie movement was going on. It was kind of a different world back then. So that was the free love bull stuff, I don't want to say anything we're bad about, bad word or nothing like that. But, this did capture the spirit of it, but it was a dumb movie. Now, what I say though is like, I'm bringing out this movie because this movie, Easy Riders, is kind of, even though I don't think any way that it's the best biker movie from that era, but it's probably the most famous biker movie from that era, and it's probably the movie that influenced, things the most, That's what I think. The Easy Rider movie influenced the culture, it influenced the bikes, everything, if you're looking at, you got some good movies like, you could look at, the Hell's Angels movies and stuff. This would be, but it's really just a synopsis of them riding, they ride tight formation and stuff. But, the point is, you don't see, there isn't anything out there that really shows what it was like back then, except in little snippets of other movies. because most of the movies made back in the 60s and 70s had this same BS Hollywood drama twist and everything. Now, I know they did that a little bit with the Bike Riders, but by and large, this movie was pretty dead on. I mean, you can argue that it wasn't, exactly historically accurate, but as far as, it's almost like you're looking at a picture or something, and a couple things are, this is supposed to be here and that's supposed to be here, and you're kind of not looking through it crystal clear at, 4K or 1080 dots per inch. You're kind of looking at it like 240 or 320 dots per inch, but you're still getting a good overview of what it was like, and that's what one thing gets me, because I tell you, I don't, I always thought that back in the day the boomers were less disciplined than the Great Depression generation and the World War II generation. I think that's very true. As overall, they're less disciplined, more spoiled, more largely. But the other side of it is, looking back from now back to that time, when these boomers were young, they're pretty crazy, wild people, man. They really were. And, you probably, any of these people who are doing a lot of this stuff in real life, they probably aren't around today, because, it's probably like, I don't know how many people, and even in my age, are dead by, how many, when you're born in 55, was it like 30% of them are dead by now or something like that or more? So, I mean, these guys probably would have been in that 30%, So you're not seeing, a good representation of what it was like back then in the people that have aged. That's why it's cool to have some of these movies. But I think that, this movie, Bike Riders, I'd highly recommend, seeing. I watched it like 4 times. And I'll probably watch it again after this, maybe. I watched a lot of biker movies over the years, but this one's in a league by itself. But it's kind of not like a movie in a way, because I can't say it's a documentary because it's not pinpoint accurate, but it is like a documentary of the general vibe of what was going on. You could criticize the movie and say, that this character isn't that isn't exactly what happened. That's not what exactly this. I think this guy here plays Johnny. What's his name? Ben Hardy? Is that his name? He plays Johnny or something, and the real Johnny, there's things that are like off with the movie, but that's not the point. He does a great job. I mean, it's freaking. You can look at all the old movies that were made way back when, and you might get 2 minutes out of a whole big movie that's really explaining what it was like. Because you know what they always do in these old ass movies they show that they made back in the day, like when they made them in the 60s, they'll show people terrorizing the town and stuff, and they take the same thing. Like, in other words, that BS riot that happened in Hollister, California in 1948. I mean, half the Hollywood biker movies out there, they run off of that theme. And that thing was so far exaggerated, it's like beyond belief. But, they still got rallies out there. It's like, but, that's what influences people, the media, right? But this is, like I said, it's not 100% accurate, but this is far more reality than you'll find in anything. And what's amazing about it, they did this, like, decades after, what is that, 65 or 40, like 50-something years, 50, 60 years after the fact that they got all this stuff together and did this movie. It's a freaking amazing they were able to do this, man. Absolutely amazing. They did more to capture the spirit of what went on back then than all the movies that you could look at. Now, I'm kind of showing Easy Riders over here, but there's a lot of other movies out there that a lot of them usually feature the Hells Angels. But it's kind of cool that You know, the Outlaws being in the middle of the country, mostly like Illinois, next to up there in Florida, where I'm at. Um, they never really had the opportunity to get access to Hollywood the way the Hells Angels did. And I don't really, I personally, you know, I don't know. I think the organizations got kind of military. After a while, probably from military people coming in them. But if you go back to the early days, like they showed in the Bike Riders, people from different clubs weren't really at each other's throats the way they are now. And even today, I mean, a lot of that calmed down because it attracts law enforcement. Um, but I know one thing that, not that I noticed firsthand, but anybody that gets in these clubs, like a club, not a riding, a motorcycle club, especially one of the big ones or even one of the small ones, you got to have a lot of discipline. You're looking at even how these guys are riding here, man. They're riding tight. This wouldn't be so bad out there in the desert, but if you've got a lot of traffic rolling around, riding tight like that, it's kind of nerve wracking, man. Unless you're freaking used to doing it. Like these guys, I heard. I don't know if I got this right, and I'm just kind of commenting off the hip. I think the HA does, as a group, they do at least 12 or 14,000 miles a year as a group in their chapters and whatever between whatever their group rides are, which is a lot of riding, just group rides. So when they're riding tight like this, they're pretty much on ESP mode. They know exactly what's going on. The a lot of upper echelon clubs are like that. But I like the fact that the Outlaws actually got a shot at Hollywood, for a change, and it's cool. It's cool. This is probably going to help them a lot. You know, like I said, I could, in my opinion, you could say you want to go in the Marine Corps, right? Not that easy to do. But it's like, you know, how many people go in the Marine Corps, right? You see, there's quite a few, man. There's quite a few, right? There's always like I think 175,000 active duty Marines. How many active duty, let's say, quote unquote, Hells Angels or Outlaws MC guys are there, or pagans or banditos or Vagos or Mongols? How many of them are around, right? Even if you put all of them together, it's a much smaller group than the USMC. But I could say though, the one thing that'd be more difficult in the military is the height and weight standards, the PFT and stuff. But as far as actual discipline, I almost think that a lot of MCs require you to be more disciplined than if you're in the military. So all of them actually do deserve a lot of respect because it takes a level of commitment, drive, and sacrifice to get in these and maintain a good status. So, I think that's getting to be sort of like a public thing, acknowledged. But back in the early days, it probably wasn't more like that, because it's kind of like sex, booze, and rock and roll and ride a lot, But that's still what's going on today. But it's like, they weren't so militant back then. That's what I understand, But I don't think they're militant. What I'm saying is that there's a lot more structure going on today, and for that reason, I don't know if I'd ever want to even be in a club, but but I like riding in groups. I'm cool with that. Like I'm in something that's kind of like a club, but I don't want to mention nothing. It's cool. I like it, but I don't want to mention shit. But anyway, over and out. I'm going to recommend that. I was kind of throwing this out about Easy Riders versus the Bike Riders, which is better, maybe, right? Well, as far as influencing a whole generation, Easy Riders influence a whole generation. I'm picking on that movie. There's a lot of other movies out there that are better in a lot of ways, but as far as actually influencing a generation, Easy Riders was probably the most influential as far as everybody who wanted that image when you're watching them go down the road and stuff, and it was like it was a lot of times people would think of Easy Riders, they think of the Hell's Angels more, and probably because Hollywood had a lot more, what do you call it, influence in California where the Hell's Angels are. But not that I'm trying to. Well, I kind of do favor the, I don't want to say nothing about favorites or nothing like that, but I guess I kind of mentioned it right here. But I think it's cool that they got this movie out that's kind of like about the Outlaws, even though they don't mention it specifically. And it's not like, it could be a help for recruiting too. Who knows? Because, people start somewhere. They start with some kind of notion. It's not like you're going to watch the Bikeriders and say, I want to go into Outlaws MC, but there's going to be somebody down the line that says, 5 years ago I watched this movie and I got a bike and it kind of influenced me to, be a probate or something, who knows. But, see, this guy would have been the HA right here, I forgot what they showed on his back patch, something toward that line, but they weren't, But there's a lot of old movies that, you could see there actually had Hell's Angels in them. Now, I'm going to tell you something else. I'm still on the end here. One thing I did not like that was out recently, and I didn't, to be fair, I didn't watch most of it, was Sons of Anarchy. And I never even heard of it till like a couple years ago. And I was like, what the hell is that? And there's some other one that's sort of like, there's another one out there besides that, sort of like along those lines. And I watched, well, I don't want to say, but there was some stuff in there, even though the bikes were cool and the way the people look, there probably were real bikers in that movie. And, the Sons of Anarchy. And they looked the part for sure. And the scenes were cool. And, they probably looked the part because they really were the part. But the way that movie, that Sons of Anarchy, had some way stupid stuff in here, man. That's all I gotta say. That I didn't watch it anymore. It was just dumb. I mean, it was just, I don't want to get, it was just way, way over the top, man. It wasn't like anything that happens in the real world, man. It was just ridiculous. Some things in that thing, I don't like it. I don't like it. And what I don't like about movies like that is because it encourages stupid behavior, man. Because Sons of Anarchy has some really, without me saying specifically, I mean, like they'll show like bikes running away from the cops, and guys are wearing the colors and they're shooting it out, and they're like, get the hell out of here, man. Like, no big deal, man. It was like, get out of here, man. It was like Hollywood dumb crap. But, the movie The Bikeriders, which I'm showing here, this is like kind of like, it almost looks like the Tokenhof, I call it Charlie, they call it. I call it the Tokenhof after the German, it's what kind of like the Outlaws, because I like the German stuff, And, that's another thing. Well, they're all into the German stuff. The HA's into it, the Hessians MC out California, they're into it too. I don't know. But the Outlaws, well, even when they had the Black Pistons were formed, that was formed over in Germany, but stuff, to support the Outlaws. But I like that Tokenhof, man. I don't know. I know they don't call it that. They call it Charlie. But to me, it reminds me that the German anti-communist symbol from 1848, where they had the Freikorps, Freikorps fighting the communists. What's it about, man? You got to be an outlaw to fight communists today. You know what I mean? That's what they're doing. Yeah, doing the righteous thing. That's what I look at it. Anyway, that's in my mind. Just my little thought. Not what they say. That's just my mind. So, I think that, this movie, The Bikeriders, though, this really did a great job of capturing what the hell it really was like back then. And it doesn't, it shows rowdiness and stuff, and it's not like, Sons of Anarchy is dumb. I mean, I really don't like that. Even though they got some great bikes in it, they got, the actors probably were real bikers. They look like real bikers. I didn't watch that much of it. I watched some of it. I only found out about it a couple years ago, and I watched some of it on YouTube, but I said, ugh, this is retarded. But I can also tell you, I think the Easy Riders movie was retarded, but it had a lot of cool scenes in it. So anyway, this is another guy getting his motorcycle crushed by a fucking dump truck or some shit. Anyway, it's out of a movie. Uh, but yeah, you do get kind of a power trip when you're on a bike. It's stupid. I don't know why, but for me, well, I'm just gonna add on the end. Really, what I kind of liked about I got into motorcycles from bicycles. If you want to really know the truth, I never really got into all this bikerdom stuff, biker lifestyle stuff, till maybe a little bit later. Um, I like to run. I used to do 8 to 10 miles a day, sometimes 20, 25-mile runs on the weekend. And then I got into bicycling as like an adjunct. Then I liked bicycling better than running. And I was doing like 100-something miles in a day sometimes. I'd be living on that thing. That's when I decided to get a motorcycle. That's where I started motorcycling from. I just liked the two wheels. But, being an ex-jarhead, I mean, I know a lot of the lingo from the biker world because it does overlap. And when we're riding as not in a club, but as jarheads, not in the jarhead LMC or nothing like that. I'm not saying that, but like as Marines, just out of our section, whatever you want to call it, and we get together informally and ride. We're riding like we were a squad, man. We're using all the hand signals and everything. We were doing it was like tight formation and all this garbage, man. So, and actually, what happened to the bike clubs is, in my opinion, they were a lot more lax back in the 60s. And I think what happened was, I know they had the military from World War II was involved in the bike clubs in the 50s and all that stuff. But when Vietnam vets came back and they're all, rejected by everybody from everywhere, when they started getting into bike clubs, they turned them into highly structured organizations. Not that they're criminal organizations, but they are structured. And I want to go back to that comment I made. I think, generally speaking, it's quite a bit tougher to get into a 1% motorcycle club than it is to get through the military, even in some of the tougher areas of the military. I'm not saying like a Navy SEAL or something like that, or Force Recon, but it is pretty tough to get into 1% thing, and it's very disciplined, and a lot of that comes from not because they're criminals, it's because they have a lot of military members that went into these clubs and they brought in military discipline. So just want to leave you with that thought so you understand, because I think the Bikeriders, that's another little tiny flaw of the movie. They kind of made it look like they went criminal. Really what happened was they went military. They went military. They went a lot more disciplined. I mean, you have fun, but you got a mission. Anyway, over and out. Have fun. These are my comments. They're pretty damn long, but I figured I'd throw my perspective in here because I'm watching. Sometimes I'm watching it on YouTube for some things, and I said, man, I'm like 7 years old. I'm like, why don't I just say some stuff? Because I remember a lot of this stuff, man. And you got people in YouTube. They're making movies. They're making videos with artificial intelligence, and they're so inaccurate. Clickbait. The top 10 this, the top 7 this, the worst 5 of this, or whatever, man. And I start to watch it. It's like it's the dumbest, inaccurate garbage going. So I mean, I'm just trying to throw my stuff out there because I remember a lot of this stuff. I mean, I wasn't a biker all my life, but I remember being around this stuff, and I remember, how it really was back then. I mean, nobody, today, I know the cops don't like some of the motorcyclists today, but back in the day, they didn't like any of them, man. Didn't like any bikers, man. None. especially if you were a long-haired, hippie-looking biker. Boy, they hated you, man, right off the bat. I'll guarantee you that stuff. So it was you were not welcome, man, even by anybody in mainstream. It was not fun. So anyway, but that, like I said, a lot of that changed by the time the late '80s came about. But even then, it was still like that somewhat.